Welcome back, everybody. This is the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com, brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. Hey, we appreciate you being here. Coast to Coast back at you again, talking to you about everything that we can think of involving University of North Carolina basketball squad, recruiting, current team development, scheduling, you name it. We appreciate you being here. Again, we're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. I am just Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. With me, as always, the two guys that I would rather have in my foxhole than anybody else, Sherelle McMillan, Sean Moran. Sean, how you feeling?
Doing well.
Yeah, Sherelle, you good?
Yeah, ready to go.
Well, I appreciate you guys being here. Listen, want to give everybody a heads up. Go ahead and rate, review us. We appreciate it. Got a very verbose review last week about how verbose I am. So shout out to that listener. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you being a part of the show. If you have negative feedback, give it to us. If you have positive feedback, give it to us. But we'd love to hear from you. Make sure we're giving you guys the stuff that you want to hear and the content that you come to expect from InsideCarolina.com. And I don't know another way to put this, but recruiting season is heating up and heating up heavily. The Tar Heels have scheduled a lot of officials and unofficials with prospects coming in from all different classes and 23, 24, even 25s. And we're going to kind of dive into that first. Sherelle, the most recent news being the last prospect that North Carolina has on their target list for 2023, Zayden High, 6'9", 225 power forward. He's playing out at Compass in Arizona. He was just in town this past weekend to watch the Tar Heels, saw the football game. Give everybody a heads up as to how that visit went, kind of what you've seen. I know he spoke with Brandon Jenkins, but kind of give what you've been able to glean from that official visit that Zayden took with his family.
Well, I think the first thing is that he took it. If you remember, Boogie Fland was supposed to visit as well. It was supposed to be live action with Carolina basketball, and then Hurricane Ian kind of ruined everyone's plans. But the fact that the family persisted and flew in late Thursday night, knowing that there's a chance they could get stranded or that the weather could be bad, I think speaks to just how much they wanted to come on the visit, how much they wanted to see UNC. So that's a positive in itself because, as we've talked about on here before, High and Compass Prep get going very early for their season, and they play a very long season. So once October hits, there's not a ton of opportunity for him on weekends to take visits. So it was kind of not, I don't want to say now or never for the UNC visit last weekend, but it needed to happen last week. And by all accounts, from the people we talked to his dad, talked to some folks around UNC. Everyone always says, "Oh yeah, the visit went well," but this seemed like a true, like, oh man, they really did a great job. His dad called them a first class organization, just raved about how together everything was about the staff and things of that nature. So I think UNC did a good job. The day after his visit, he released the top five, which is Villanova, Michigan, Arkansas, Texas, and UNC. To recap, he's been to Villanova and Michigan on official visits. Those were during his junior year. Villanova was in June, Michigan was in July. Has not been on an official visit to Texas, but has taken an unofficial trip there, and then is working on potentially scheduling a trip to Arkansas. So that's kind of where things stand. I think he said he's kind of going, off of a feeling. He's not going to set a timetable or anything. So, he could make a decision tomorrow. He could make a decision signing day in November. He could wait till February. We don't really know. But I do think North Carolina definitely put its best foot forward this past weekend.
And if you're Inside Carolina subscribers or just people listening to this show, how heavy or how important would you say it is to see if another official gets scheduled? Do you feel like that's a tell, or do you feel like that's kind of the big watermark?
Yeah, I think so. Because Arkansas, they've been there from the beginning. They were on him
Mm-hmm.
before kind of the blow up in April. He
Mm-hmm.
was someone they identified early, but they do have a few other targets and a couple that are more highly rated than he is. So I would say if an Arkansas visit doesn't get scheduled, you can start to kind of glean a few things about where he might be leaning. But I do think he'll end up taking the Arkansas visit. We'll just have to see when it is and kind of go from there. But again, for North Carolina, I don't think these could have gone much better on his visit than they did.
And we talked about last time on the show, it was very important for North Carolina to get high on campus, and they did that. Um, let that sit for a second. Sean, you've had a chance to watch some of Zayden High's film and even have seen more things than you saw prior to previous episodes of this show. Tell us a little bit of what you might have picked up in watching him that maybe you hadn't seen before, or some things that listeners and viewers of this show might appreciate.
I think the main thing was going back through the three-point shooting, whether it's UNC or wherever he may go, and this will come out in the Fit article this week. But question of can he shoot? Because everybody talks about him being a big man that has shooting ability, but when you look at the stats, around 25% in AAU play on 102 shots, and 26% as a junior in high school. The numbers don't bear that out. So decided to go take a look into those shots. And I think when it comes, the one thing that stuck out was over 40% of his shots were coming from the NBA distance in AAU play, and even 7 to 8 of those were coming from Steph Curry, Damian Lillard range. So I think if he's able to, and this was kind of talked about in the article that Sherelle recently had on him, if he's able to, I think, increase his shot selection, just where he's taking them and the time of the shot clock, I think there, you should see a pretty significant increase pretty quickly. Wouldn't call him, one of the purest shooters that I've ever seen, but he does almost look like a guard when he's coming around pick and rolls or in catch and shoot situations, just with how he moves and how effortless the shot is. So I do think if he's not setting up from the NBA 3-point line, he's setting up more closer to the college three, and he's not taking them early on in the shot clock, but taking good open shots. I definitely can see that number significantly increasing. He's very comfortable setting up from the perimeter. I mean, that's where he'd like to catch the ball, and I think it probably goes to what Hubert Davis might be looking for in his future bigs. I think we've gotten used to seeing Armando down low, but between Jalen Washington and Will Shaver, and now potentially Zayden High, is somebody that wants to set up on the perimeter. And I think Jalen Washington probably has a little more post ability. There were maybe only a handful, 10 possessions or so where High was in the post. So definitely not an area that he wants to set up, but I think with his size, he can set up there when necessary. So just in terms of his offense, I think definitely some improvement that can be had there. And then another thing to like for UNC fans, as well as Coach Davis and the staff, is his offensive rebounding ability. Even when he is setting up from the perimeter, he will crash the glass pretty hard, versus just setting up and kind of standing out there and running back on defense. So definitely not the most athletically gifted big man in terms of his running and jumping ability, but one that kind of has that mindset and the mentality to crash the glass, which a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, Sean, I'm curious because one thing I've read from some of the national guys is a constant question of his motor, which for those who aren't initiated, motor is just how hard you play. And I never saw that as an issue with him in the times I've seen him play. I'm curious what you saw looking back at some of those games. Is it really an issue like some of the national folks have said?
I mean, you could probably get that because he is, once again, he's not banging in the post. He's not physical. He is setting up on the perimeter, shooting jump shots or looking to go off the dribble a little bit. So, I think you can get that from maybe the style of play. I think there's definitely he's no Tyler Hansbrough by any stretch of the imagination, but I do, some of the times I did see him crash the glass. You could tell his mind was made up and he was going hard after it. I think that'll have to increase this year and next year, but at the same time, I think he does have that switch that can be turned on even a little brighter versus just not having that innate instinct or interest to crash the glass, especially if you're setting up far away from the basket versus always being in the post and having a few more opportunities.
So I'm going to ask you something that I'm sure you've got a better handle on this than most because you watch so much ball. But when you see a guy that's a late developer like Zayden High is, what's usually the number one cause of that? Is it that he's figuring out his body? Is it that intellectually he's starting to kind of see some things click? What's usually the one cause that causes a guy to make such a big leap so late in his prep career?
I mean, for a big guy, usually just starting to put everything together and get comfortable in that body. I think for him, he has guard skills, but I think it's probably also going through that. Am I a big man that needs to be in the post, or am I the guard in my mind that I want to be? So I think it's also understanding, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and with Zayden High, I mean, I also think just for the past few years, it's been harder from a rankings perspective, given some of the, especially 2 years ago, the lack of basketball that was watched. So you are seeing guys that maybe they didn't even improve that much. They're just being seen in more situations. But he's also hailing from the San Antonio area, which is not a hotbed for basketball. But in general, he did make the improvement. You could see that from his offer list, and I think that became, with him becoming a little more physical and a little bit more in tune to where he's strongest at, both offensively and defensively.
Do we know if he actually played 2 years ago? Was he one of those kids that like got nothing out of COVID? Because I think there were some people that played either one of those 2 years, and then some people like just missed a good chunk for almost 2 full seasons. Do we have any idea where he fell in that?
I think he played because he switched AAU teams.
Okay.
And Texas was pretty open during the
Right.
summer of 2020.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure he played.
Okay. Well, that's good info. Appreciate it, Sean, as always. Hey, listen, there was another mention that you had there a few minutes ago, Sherelle, about Boogie Fland, and he obviously didn't make it. Hurricane Ian caused some issues for a lot of people. We're kind of sitting back waiting for that, right?
Yeah, that's just he's still going to take an official visit. I think the thing with him is his season gets underway early November, and Stepanak plays a very competitive schedule, national schedule. And then obviously they're in the New York Catholic League, which is, one of the best in the country. So he's going to want to be kind of ultra focused on his high school season. So I would say the visit needs to happen within the next month for it to happen, probably during his junior year.
So another one that's happening as we speak, as we record this right now on Tuesday night, October the 4th, Trentyn Flowers on campus for UNC. He is a 6'8", 180, I guess wing guard or wing forward out of Combine Academy in Charlotte. He's on an unofficial. Sherelle, you going to give kind of a synopsis of what that unofficial looks like and what next steps for Trentyn Flowers might be?
Yeah, it's going to be very similar to what Isaiah Harwell had when he came 2 weekends ago for an extended unofficial visit. It went over 2 days. Flowers is only on campus, probably 5, 6, 7 hours. So it'll just be condensed. It'll be a lot of the stuff that you would do on an official visit, just kind of shortened. He'll take, we saw pictures of him in the Carolina uniform, talk to Hubert Davis. I would imagine he watched practice if they practiced today. Talk to some of the academic people and support staff. So really just trying to give him a feel for the campus and for the basketball program, so that if a time comes when an official visit is scheduled, they can kind of be more expansive with that. But if this is the only visit, then he got pretty much the meat of an official visit.
I want to ask you a quick question too, that I think a lot of fans and folks who listen to this show might be curious about. When recruits come and watch UNC practice, how involved is Hubert Davis in like talking with the recruit and talking with his parents or, parent or caregivers or whatever? Or is he totally locked in on practice, or the recruits? I mean, or are the assistants running practice, or is Hoots talking to him? Like, how does that usually look for UNC having orchestrated practice, and then this recruit and his family, who's important to the future of the program? What does that engagement look like?
That is so funny. When a preacher is about to like give a sermon, and somebody takes the scripture, he's like, I was just about to preach from that. So we talked to Isaiah Harwell, and this is going to be in the story that we'll post probably.
For the record, I didn't know this was coming, guys. I did not steal this.
It's funny. So they were just describing how Hubert was with them during it. I don't think it was an official practice, but it was very much like that, workout and skill development stuff. And they said that, Hubert was very hands-on. And then when the guys went to do their stations with shooting and stuff, that's when he came over and started talking to them and, just conversed. And, he would say something to the Harwell family, and then he would yell at RJ Davis to do something, and then he would go back and talk to them. So that that's the most recent example we have. So it seems like he's kind of hands-on with the players. When they're doing something that doesn't require his undivided attention, he'll talk to the recruits and families, but still pay attention to what the team is doing. So, and that's just from a visit 2 weeks ago.
You almost wonder too if it's easier for him to do that now with a very advanced and experienced team, as opposed to guys that at a younger team he would be breaking them in at this point in the season really heavily. Do you want to tease that that article that's coming about Isaiah Harwell's visit again? Isaiah Harwell, 6'5", 180 from Pocatello, Idaho. You want to tease that?
He had an extensive unofficial visit 2 weeks ago, so we were able to talk to him and his father and his mother to get their impressions. And I'll give away one thing: they have shut down visits for the rest of the year. So they went to UNC on an unofficial visit. They swung by Duke Sunday before they left, and Dad said that he wants Harwell to focus on the season, and he's not taking any more visits in season. So again, it was already big for UNC to get him out there that early. Now, knowing that he's not going to go anywhere else, he kind of has that extended unofficial visit from UNC probably top of mind, and that's going to sit with him for months. So really huge deal for North Carolina to get him out there when they did.
Awesome. Sean, tell us a little bit about Isaiah Harwell's game. I know he kind of popped on the radar out of the blue because he's in the 25 class, which again, can't wrap our heads around, but 2025 class, tell us a little bit about his game now that you've had a chance to see him a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was down, this is last live period in July, I made it down to Seal Beach for the Adidas tournament for a Saturday afternoon and evening, and wish I'd had him on my radar instead of a few others, and good to see him in person, but have been able to go back and watch some of that. And I mean, he's one of those guys where you can't tell that he's just finished his freshman year. He looks like he is literally about to go into his senior year, from a physical standpoint, both size and strength wise. From a field goal percentage, definitely didn't have great numbers in AAU play, but once again, I think that was a pretty big jump up. The 2 years in class is pretty significant. But when you are watching him, he has a pretty good shooting stroke out to the 3-point line. Very, very calm and collected, and really just a nice looking shot. But with his size and strength, he does like to attack and attack the basket, which he can do pretty efficiently. So a very versatile offensive player. Defensively can guard a few positions. Going back to the offensive side of the ball, he also is probably a secondary ball handler. I don't think you want him being the primary ball handler, but there's a lot of possessions where he'd bring the ball to the court, initiate the offense. I think as he progresses, given how young he is, I think the main thing will be the separation he's able to get offensively. I think right now he can use his shoulder when he gets it into people, but he seems to really lack, but he seemed to lack a quickness burst. So I would say that would be the one thing I would be paying attention to as he goes forward, as well as, are people catching up to him in his class, or is he able to stay a top 10, 15 prospect, or is he up there just because of the size? I think his skill level will keep him in that top tier, but I think from a quickness standpoint, that would be one of the main things I'll be watching going forward.
It's hard to project a kid that young to me, and you guys are the ones that watch all the balls, so it's hard for me to think about what are you looking at when you see a kid that's this early on in his maturation, and how do you kind of project what his game's going to look like. All right, last one we'll talk about for recruiting. Elliott Cadeau coming in this Friday, I think, 6'1", 165 point guard out of Bergen Catholic up there in Jersey. He is a 2024 prospect. Sherelle, anything you want to share about that, that upcoming visit, other than kid caught a break with Ian, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. The main things are he's taking an official visit to Texas Tech. That was a couple of weeks back. That was his first. And North Carolina is going to be his second. It's interesting because I don't want to say it was a nothing weekend on campus, but there was no home football game this weekend. There was really going to be nothing going on. So it was going to be a visit primarily focused on watching practice and hanging around the team, probably getting to know support staff and all that stuff, and going hang out on Franklin Street. still will be all those things, but now live action is this Friday. So he'll kind of be there for the unofficial start / celebration of Carolina basketball. And, one visit or a visit from weekend to weekend doesn't change anything, but that's a pretty huge event. And we talked about it in one of the weekly scoops recently. Carolina kind of puts their best foot forward when it comes to recruits and having them visit on that weekend. So the fact that he'll be there now, I think, helps UNC. I don't know to what degree, but it's not a bad thing that instead of kind of a regular weekend, now he's got live action. And again, he's one of 2 league guards offered in 2024 by UNC, Boogie Fland being the other one. And yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess.
Another thing that's changed, when you talk about players coming on campus for an official, there's a football game. That's an obvious thing that they'll build around. With this one, live action with Hubert Davis is something they'll build around. Can you give us a little peek behind the curtain? Will they go watch the game together, the football game together Saturday, or will they do something else? What sort of team hanging out stuff does UNC typically try to structure for things like this?
That's a good one. I know they've done bowling a few times. There's I think one group went to like laser tag a couple of times. There's always just kind of hanging around Franklin Street.
Mm-hmm.
One player a couple of years ago, he was just like, yeah, we hung out in the room and played 2K, and the guy was like, it was a great time. So usually it's those kind of things, but for someone like Cadeau, I think it's going to be a lot of ball, just being around the game,
Mm-hmm.
getting shots up. He'll get his workout in. He can watch them. Those are the kind of things that I think he'll really gravitate towards. It reminds me, RJ Davis, when he visited UNC, there was no football game. There wasn't much going on. It might have been like fall break, maybe. But he was there with Cole Anthony. He was there with the team, and just kind of fell in love with Carolina. So it doesn't have to be a stadium full of 80,000 people 53,000 people in Keenan or 21,000 people in the Smith Center. Sometimes it's just about hanging with the guys and playing basketball.
Sean, any idea about how Boogie Fland or Elliott Cadeau will fit with this roster? Do you feel like one is any better, or their skill set's pretty similar? Great answer.
I mean, I think it's a good question. I think Boogie Fland has a higher ceiling in my mind, in part just due to the big age difference between the two, but also some of the size and length that Boogie does have. But Cadeau, when I first saw him during the Kansas City EYBL, just reminded me of, hey, this is a true old school point guard type of guy that can handle the ball, and Sherelle and I were discussing beforehand. You watch some of his highlight tapes, and he's dunking on people and doing things very, looking extremely athletic on these tapes. But when I was watching in person in the EYBL, it was almost, I was kind of calling him a sneaky good athlete, where he could get to where he wanted, but it might take him a few different combos to get there. But very strong ball handler, knows how to run a team. I think Boogie is definitely has the higher upside, but I think we can see how that plays out at least over the next year at high school, before making a determinant one way or the other. So I think also a lot depends on UNC and how that situation is shaping up, with potentially Seth Trimble returning, Simeon Wilcher. So I think there could be a lot of question marks on what does the backcourt look like for UNC when that class is ready to enter. So a lot of things to figure out, but I think it makes sense to look at a point guard and we talked about the New York, New Jersey angle, so we'll see if that continues to pay off for Hubert Davis.
Yeah, you got to figure a guy that played in New York as long as Hubert did, for whatever reason, may just connect with those guys more. Sherelle, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this year he actually transferred. He's at Link Prep in, I think it's Branson, Missouri. And so that is a team that has a lot of high major players. And we talked to the head coach there last week, and with the scoop, you can go find it. And I think it's interesting that they kind of built the team around him. So they're looking for him to take another step up as a leader, as a player. So that's something that we'll be kind of looking forward to watch during his junior season.
Well, something we want to watch is when these guys get on campus and they have nothing to do because there's no home football game on Saturday. Smart money says they're going to Johnny T-shirt. Johnny T-shirt, or maybe they're just checking out johnnytshirt.com when they're hanging out in the dorms or whatever, players' apartments. But I'm sure Johnny T-shirt is a part of that. And if we know anything, it's that when Johnny T-shirt is a part of a prospect's visit, that usually becomes a positive effect for the Tar Heels and Hubert Davis. Johnny T-shirt, big supporters of ours. We appreciate their allegiance and how much they support Inside Carolina content and their alums, and it's locally owned and operated, and all of the things that we love about patronizing a business you can find at Johnny T-shirt. Plus they have an amazing selection. The fall's here. Weather's turning, leaves are turning. Fall is in the air. If I could get a little Walt Whitman on you, but go get some sweatshirts, get you a hoodie, get you a new fleece, get you something nice that looks good, and let Johnny T-shirt supply it for you. Inside Carolina premium subscribers know you get an extra 10% off of their already amazing prices. Hit them up. I've said it 1,000 times before. If Johnny T-shirt doesn't have it, you don't need it. But we appreciate them supporting Inside Carolina's content and hope you will support them as well. Take a quick break. Let some national advertisers run some ads right here. And we'll be right back to talk about the coming season for the Tar Heels, because live action with Hubert Davis is this coming Friday. So we got more of that to talk about. Stick around. All right. Thanks for sticking around. Talk a little bit about the current iteration of Tar Heel basketball as they get rolling with live action with Hubert Davis this coming Friday. They've already been practicing together. We talked a little bit on the last episode about how this freshman class might fit in and what they could do to earn playing time. I think one of Sherrell's favorite turn of phrases is, quickest path to playing time. We talked about that a little bit on the last episode. This time I want to talk about the guys that are sophomores this year, specifically about how they might be able to just improve the team and what skill sets they can bring to not only make themselves better, make themselves more of a viable part of the Tar Heel rotation, but what we might expect for them. Sean, first thing I'd ask for you is a guy like DeMarco Dunn. I think a lot of folks have really kind of written him off based on Seth Trimble coming in and the older guards that UNC has on the roster. But DeMarco Dunn might actually sneak up in some prize of people because he definitely has the frame for it. What would you like to see from DeMarco this year that you think might actually be something else he could build himself as an asset for Hubert Davis and this staff?
I think last year was tough for him, but I don't think there were high expectations for him to begin with, just given who they had returning and really where he came in from a ranking perspective and coming in. I think he was offered and committed without actually having seen him in person, if I remember correctly. But he did get a little bit of playing time early on in the ACC. I remember the Wake game where he got 2 shots up, and then it was pretty much banished to the bench after that game. But I think we saw it a lot with the freshman to sophomore jump that players like RJ Davis and Caleb Love had. Obviously not that given the lack of playing time, but he played well in the earlier scrimmage. I think he has some shooting ability and some athleticism. And I think hopefully the game has slowed down for him a little bit more. I mean, the main issue is can he get playing time just to get comfortable? I think it's very hard to come in and all the pressure lies on the one shot you might get. If you miss it, you're out. Or if you don't get opportunity, you might not see another one. So I think a lot of it will go, how is he playing in practice? Is he able to earn the coach, the trust for the coaching staff? But if he does, he's just another weapon that could be used really at the 2 or 3, I would say, and especially as an another outside shooter. I don't think you want him handling the ball, but I think with Seth Trimble coming in, you wouldn't have to see that at all. So all that being said, I think there is the potential there. I thought maybe he looks to transfer out just knowing everybody that's coming back, but I think having just that 1 year, almost a redshirt year under his belt, I think the size and the skill set is there. He probably just needed to adapt a little bit more to the level of play, and now it comes down to what does he do with the chances that he will get early in the season.
Sherrill, I'd ask you the same thing. How do you project DeMarco Dunn, maybe making himself more of a fixture in the roster? Or what's the one thing you think he could do to really endear himself to Hubert Davis in that rotation?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a classic. I don't know. And the only reason I say that is because he's one of the more mysterious players I think, really to come into UNC since we've been doing this. Only because the way it was set up, um, I think it was maybe February of 2020. We got a tip like, "Hey, this kid's really good. He might be the best player in the state. You guys should watch him." And then COVID happened, and then didn't get a chance to watch him. He took like a ghost trip to UNC where he couldn't talk to the coaches, and then committed. And then we saw a little bit of him during his high school season, but you know how that competition can be, especially when you play somewhere like Westover. So
The shade.
yeah, so it's just like, we don't really know what he is as a player because we've seen him 3 or 4 games over the last like 3 years. I think again, like you said, the path of playing time. I think it's just to come in and play defense because the way this roster is going to be constructed, you know that you're going to get probably 40 to 50 points between kind of Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Armando Bacot, and Linky Black every game. 45 to 50, I would say minimum between those guys. So scoring off the bench isn't really going to be a huge deal. So how can you impact the game? And I keep saying it, the way to impact the game to help North Carolina's offense is to come in and just defensively, just be wild, just be, hair on fire and tire the other guards out. So I think for him, with his length, with his size, I think that's the way he can get on the court. But I honestly, I don't have a great feel because I just don't know a ton about him as a player. And maybe we'll get a chance to see it starting Friday and then in the exhibition games. But if Hubert Davis doesn't have an extended rotation, you got to think he's going to be one of the first ones out. Not his fault, just like Will Shaver and Jalen Washington. It's just the guys who are in front of him are just really good. So I think for him, it's kind of the same thing as a freshman. It's, put yourself in a position to contribute, and then that will help you a ton if you hang around as a junior when you probably are in line for a lot more playing time.
Is a role like a Nate Britt had too much to ask? Is that too much to be expected, or do you think that's realistic for him?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Trimble will have is more of that Nate Britt role, the first guard off the bench. I think it's just going to be same thing. Just when your number's called, you got to deliver. And I know that's hard because you don't know when it's going to be, and it might be for 4 minutes or it might be for 25. But it's tough, but that's what these guys are looking at.
Yeah. If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Sean, one more thing you want to say about DeMarco Dunn?
I mean, I think for Dunn, and it is hard in today's game where every year, you can go to another school, transfer, whatever it may be. But I do think his junior year is the one that is, if there is something there, that's where we're gonna see it. I think we could potentially see some glimpses of it this year, but there's so many talented players on this year's team, and we know that Hubert does like a small roster, and I could definitely see them going back to that in the latter part of the year. So I really think if we can see some glimpses from him this year, and then just given the likely departures after the season, I think his junior season is almost Rayshon Terry at not to that level, but in terms of that type of jump, sophomore to junior year.
Yeah, that's when the minutes will open up. I think that's a pretty good insight. So the other guy that folks I think got just enough of a taste of, got just enough of a hit of last year to where they are really excited to see what he can be and how he fits. I think the big question mark is how he fits. That's Dontrez Styles. Sherelle, I'm going to ask you the same question we kind of did about DeMarco Dunn. What's the one thing Dontrez Styles can do to make himself indispensable on this roster?
I'm on repeat. It's toughness. it's toughness. It's rebounding, and it's playing defense. If he can do those things, that'll give him more playing time. And we know he's dynamic in transition, and all that stuff is cyclical because you can't get in transition if you don't play good defense, and you can't get in transition if you don't grab a rebound. So I think when he's in the game, more than likely spelling either Leaky or Pete Nance or Puff Johnson, that's what he has to do. I know he wants to expand his game and he wants to be seen as a true three, but just embrace, the skills that you have. And then when you embrace that and do what the coach asks, then there might be a little more freedom to kind of do some of the things you want. So I think that's kind of for him where he has to do what the coach asks, find 2 or 3 things. A guy we love talking to calls them anchors, 2 or 3 things to anchor you to the rotation. Become really proficient in that, and then you might be allowed to do some other things. So rebounding, defense, finishing in transition.
Sean, offensively, where can he go? You know, Sherelle talked about the dynamic athleticism, his ability to kind of do some highlight reel stuff. We saw him hit big jumpers. The jumper at the beginning of the overtime against Baylor is something that will always be attached to his career, I believe. What can he do offensively? Can he become a reliable outside shooter, or is he a guy that needs to look for a mid-range? What's something he can do offensively to, in addition to all the things Sherelle said, that might be able to kind of carve him a bigger niche on this team?
I mean, I think to Sherrell's point, offensive rebounding and just he offers something that nobody else on the team can offer in terms of just his explosiveness and his athleticism. And whether that's catching lobs or attacking the glass or cutting backside, I think those can all be easy ways to get baskets. I think when you did see him in this past year, he wasn't shy about firing off threes, and he didn't come in. We talked about it well before he got into Chapel Hill. He didn't come in with a reputation as a 3-point shooter. Even though he went 3 for 18 on the year, I was surprised when he did take shots. They were usually online for the most part. Sometimes some of them were pretty off, but I always felt they looked better than you anticipated. They just, once again, it goes back to just getting that 1 or 2 can make things a lot tougher versus if you know you're going to get 4 or 5 shots. So I think if he's been able to improve his outside shooting, that will play in tremendously. Last year it was the Marquette and Baylor game. Both games he played well, and I think some were kind of talking, well, is this going to be him going forward? But you look at both those games, and those were a little more up tempo from a possession standpoint, with 2 athletic teams that like to get after it. And that was last year where I think he was most comfortable. But if you put him in a slow down, grind it out, is he going to be able to make that difference? And last year, that's where Puff was better suited. But I think for him, it's the athleticism is a game changer. Can he be respectable from the outside would be a huge win. But once again, there's going to be so many different combinations with Pete Nance in the fold versus if there hadn't been a Brady replacement and it's literally just Puff and Styles. So once again, a lot of bodies, and but I think having that experience, especially that postseason experience, should help him a lot this year around.
I think Tar Heel fans should be excited at the prospect of Dontrez Styles going against subs from other teams in the ACC this year. Sherelle, anything else you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to clarify in that I'm not saying that he can't expand his game to do those things that you mentioned, Joey.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that with this roster, barring injury, they're not going to need him to.
Right.
So he's got to focus on what this particular team needs. And I think it's those 3 things that we mentioned before.
And who knows, less pressure on both of these guys since the expectations have been reduced for both of them. Maybe that allows them to thrive a little bit. I think that's something everybody would love to see. All right, guys, before we get out of here, I'll give you a one last crack at it. Sherelle, anything else you want to add to tonight's show that maybe I glossed over?
I don't think so. Like you said, it's a hot recruiting time. Things will slow down a little bit once practice starts and exhibition games, but the staff does like to get on the road and recruit. So we'll do our best to monitor all those things, keep you updated.
Sean, anything from you, bud?
No 2 pennies from me today, but excited that college hoops is 1 month out. So looking forward to it.
I do have one thing.
What's up?
I'll just let everybody know that ACC Network Extra is where they can watch live action on Friday. So that is the on the Watch ESPN app. If you have like a subscription to a cable company or something, that's your ticket to watch live action on the ESPN app.
There you go. My man just gave you guys the details. If you don't have anything going on Friday night, you know where to be and how to watch the Tar Heels' first, I guess, unofficial salvo into this upcoming basketball season. But boys, as always, appreciate what you bring to the table. Love you being here. Thankful for your time. Shout out to everybody who's listened or watched to this episode. We appreciate you being here as well. Remember, rate, review us. We love it. Love the feedback. Want to make sure we're doing great stuff for you and kind of maintaining the level of excellence that Inside Carolina always strives for. But until next time, shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring, to John Siegley for producing. I'm just Joey Powell for Sherelle McMillan and Sean Moran. We appreciate you being here. This has been the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Like